You're not going to tell the same thing in the same way everywhere to everyone. But at the core of that is your authenticity. At the core of that, you know your values, you know your why,
Mhm.
you know what you're trying to say. And so I think the biggest advice I always give to people is understanding your why. Because if you don't know your why, nobody else will.
We are back with another episode of Mothering Holistically, a podcast amplifying everyday moms' voices to share stories, practical tips, and inspiration. I'm your host, Kaylee Berlini, a mama finding balance in motherhood because balance is key when mothering holistically. So, no matter where you are connecting with us from, please subscribe and give us feedback as we continue to make this podcast motivational and helpful for you all. So, today we are chatting with Ayanna Dutton Diaz, wife, mother, and founder of 80 Consulting, where she helps leaders and brands own their voice, clarify their narrative, and bring big ideas to life. She is also the co-founder of Non-Corporate Girls LLC, a podcast and lifestyle media platform dedicated to professional and entrepreneurial wellness. Both ventures are rooted in the same mission: bridging gaps, sparking possibility, and creating safe spaces for impact. So please help me give a very warm welcome to Miss Ayanna. So hello, thank you so much for joining me
Hi.
today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Yeah. Yes, I just wanted to start off by allowing you to, introduce yourself and just give us a little bit of background of how you got into consulting and then of course non-corporate girls, and I just want to hear that story.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity. So, yeah, my background is really interesting. It's definitely not linear. I've had a lot of ebbs and flows, as we all, kind of know, navigate
Yeah.
life. I actually started out in sales and then I kind of
Okay.
pivoted to fashion. And I had always wanted to be in fashion. It was my thing. And so I
Yeah.
did everything. I was a stylist, wardrobe shopper, personal shopper, all kinds of things in the fashion world. And then I
Wow.
decided that I wanted to own my own boutique, and which I
Okay.
didn't, but I decided I wanted to do that for short girls because I feel like no one
Oh.
cares about petite short girls. And so I wanted to honor that. So I went to school to get my MBA.
Mm.
In that process, I realized I did not want to own a boutique. I also probably didn't want to do anything like in terms of entrepreneurship in the fashion world. And
Mm.
so I was trying to figure out what does that look like for me. And I really leaned a lot into marketing. And I had already majored
Okay.
in that in undergrad and stuff, but I really did a lot of work in it when I went to grad school. Also focused a lot on entrepreneurship because at heart, I'm an entrepreneur. And so post grad school, I ended up having a long career in marketing, actually, in fashion. I started in corporate fashion. So all of my
Oh, okay.
skills in the field took me to corporate fashion marketing. And then from there, kind of ventured into, tech, lifestyle, pretty much everything except hospitality. And in
Mm.
that process, people always ask me, they're like, hey, how are you able to jump from so many different industries? Like,
Yeah.
it's hard. And I was just like, I do a really good job of owning my narrative. I know exactly kind of my why, how I operate in spaces, what I can bring. Transferable skills are huge. And so I've just
Mhm.
been fortunate enough to be able to tell my story and own that. And a lot of people were like, how do I do that? And so that
Mhm.
kind of led me to AD consulting in an interesting way. I always knew my purpose, but it kind of like, I don't know, found me. It was like faith in that way where
Yeah.
I've been able to help people, brands, and individuals tap into their potential on how do they own their narrative, how do they own their story, how do they show up in spaces that matter
Yeah.
to them in the right way because I did it for myself. And all of that kind of like couples around identity, right?
Mhm.
Especially being someone who's like a person of color, I am queer. Like
Yeah.
there's so many different worlds that I fit into that people try to box me in, but somehow I'm able to like expand. So I wanted to help
Yeah.
other people do that as well. And then Non-Corporate Girls kind of was born from just frustration, honestly, because when I was
Mm.
younger in my 20s, me and my co-founder, we realized that we were oftentimes the only one. We were the only woman, only person of
Mhm.
color. We
Mhm.
were in spaces where we were misunderstood a lot. We couldn't show
Mhm.
creativity, none of that. And so we felt like we couldn't be the only people who felt this way. And so we kind of like created our own community, the two of us, of being accountability partners. And then that just
Okay.
turned into this whole thing of like, we should start a podcast. And then that became like our digital diary, as we love to call it. And I don't know, 6, 7 years later, we have this community of people who understand what it's like to be in the 9 to 5, have your 5 to 9, and what does it mean to be in the middle? What are those tips, advice, resources? Seeing people in real time, we have a ton of
Mm-hmm.
we've had a ton of guests that kind of run the gamut of what that looks like. And so yeah, that's how we've been able to create that. And then we realized that it wasn't just a podcast. It was really a
Mm-hmm.
world, a platform where we can actually offer a lot of things to other people. And so that's kind of how we've been navigating. So that's kind of how both those things came to life.
I love that. I feel like there's so many different facets that I want to touch upon. And I'll start from the beginning with
Okay.
you starting in fashion because I can definitely connect with that. I first off, growing up, I've always known that I guess I didn't know I was an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
If we can say that, just because
Yeah.
I was so young. But so many family members are entrepreneurs. I mean, great grandma, dad, auntie, like so many of my family members. And so it was just something that happened in life. Like I would go next door and be like, "Can I wash your car?" Like I would ask my dad because I grew up on a ranch with horses, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'll clean the corrals, for a little bit of change," and just trying to find different ways to put myself out there and make money. And I just thought I was just a hustler, and I just wanted some extra money to buy clothes or shoes or what have you. And then when I turned 16, I started working at Wet Seal, for those of you that know the store
Throwback.
Wet Seal, yeah. And then the laws had changed. So anyway, I ended up in like food businesses until I turned 18. Ended up getting recruited by True Religion, which of course is fashion. And
Fun.
at 19, like 18 and a half, 19, became a manager at 20. And that kind of just sparked like sales,
Right.
business. And so I completely understand where that kind of draw was for you, and with how competitive that market is, knowing like maybe I don't want to be in this space. What made you figure out that you were like, I know I want to be an entrepreneur, but fashion, like what turned you off to fashion?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I don't know. I don't think I'll ever be completely turned off to fashion. Like I'm a fashion girl through and through.
Yeah.
But I think that, running a fashion business is very different, right? And so I think
Mhm.
that I wanted something that was more expansive, but I didn't even
Okay.
have that language honestly at the time. I didn't think about, oh my God, I wanted something expensive. I just felt like having me owning a boutique at that time was very
Mhm.
limiting for me. It just didn't feel like
I
it was the
see.
right thing. And I just
Mhm.
loved marketing. Like I loved marketing. I love storytelling. And not that I couldn't do it if I had my boutique, right? Because we do it all
Yeah.
as entrepreneurs. But
Yeah.
I don't know, it just felt like it wasn't the right space for me anymore. It felt like I had had this dream that I was holding on to. And then when I went to grad school to try to make it happen, I kind of let go of that dream and I had a new dream. And
Okay.
so that's kind of how it
Yeah.
came to be. But I think with entrepreneurship is so funny because I think that for a long time I was an entrepreneur, and in these I've worked corporate and
Mm.
non-corporate. So in corporate spaces, I'm very entrepreneurial. So like I'm an entrepreneur within an organization. So it just made sense for me
Mm.
to have a path of entrepreneurship somehow, even though at the
Right.
time I didn't know what that looked like.
Okay, and then I do want to pivot because I'm thinking about boutique. I'm thinking about brick and mortar. Unless you
Yeah.
were was your boutique something that you wanted to do online, or was a brick and mortar that you had?
It was in the moment it was brick and mortar.
Okay, yeah. So I'm thinking you went from brick and mortar idea to worldwide in terms of
Yeah.
online. For me personally, I'm challenging myself with the podcast because I feel like I'm so good in person. I'm so good making bonds and communicating in
Mhm.
person, chatting in person, but putting myself out there online, selling yourself, telling your story, marketing yourself online, I think is a different beast. So how did you
Yes.
go from like this brick and mortar small town type of vibe to being like, "No, I'm worldwide, I'm big vision." Like, how did that how did that transition
Oh
happen?
my God. This is such a good question because it was really hard. Like I'm like so it's crazy. I consider myself an introvert. Now, people I
Right.
know they're like you're kind of introvert extrovert. I'm like, okay, whatever. But if I'm in a social setting, I know how to be the person. I know how to get things done, but
Mm-hmm.
really I'm an introvert at heart. And so growing up I was really shy, like things like this would terrify me. And so even in grad school, I was terrified when you have to present and things like that. I
Mm,
hated all of it. But what I will say is I think that, you could probably relate to this. When you're like coming out of college or undergrad and someone like me going to grad school and stuff, you have to network. You have to get out there. And so I had to get out of my own way a lot. And I had to also learn how I navigate, what works for me. I had to learn my skills to networking, what actually served me. It's very different than other people, especially feeling like I'm an introvert. I had to
mm,
learn kind of like what does it mean for me to put myself out there? And then I had to really own how do I tell my
yeah.
story, which was the
Yeah.
biggest thing that people struggle with. I had to start getting clear about a lot of that stuff. And that took time. It
Mm-hmm.
took work. It took a lot of energy, a lot of failed
Mm-hmm.
attempts, a lot of lessons learned, all of it. But I
Yeah.
think I started getting better at it quickly because,
Mm-hmm.
I live in New York City. I mean, I was born and raised in New York City. So there's also
Okay.
that. Like, I am in the mecca of fashion and entertainment and networking. And so, there was a lot of events. There was things that I would constantly force myself
Yeah.
to be in. I gave myself a lot of tests. I'd be like, you have to go into this space and you need to collect 3 business cards. You need to have a conversation with this one.
Mm,
Like I would do a lot of those things. And so it pushed me that when I started owning my narrative, that got a little bit more interesting. And then honestly, the podcast, I would say the podcast is the last thing that kind of like helped level that out. Because when I first started
okay.
the podcast, I had never really interviewed anyone. I had
Mm,
never done none of that. Like I was a fish out of water. I didn't even know how to like be assertive enough in a space. You already know when you're interviewing someone, it's a whole different beast. And I
yeah.
think going through that process helped me a lot. And then from there, constantly putting myself out there to be on panels and things like that. So it was a
Mm,
lot of like practice, lesson learned, and
yeah.
getting to that place. And then, yeah, now I'm not a natural or anything. I still get freaking scared. I have lots of anxiety, but I'm a lot more comfortable in a lot of spaces because I've been so uncomfortable. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up because first off, I am I've been I wouldn't say forced, but kind of forced. I'm a singer and I've been publicly singing since
Oh
I
my
was 5.
gosh.
And that was a lot of how I got
Yeah.
involved with being in front of crowds. But in terms of so it started off in church. And of course, when you read the Bible and stuff, it talks about humility. And I always, for some reason in my brain, it clicked with if I talk about what I'm doing, if I talk about being excited about what I'm doing, it is bragging. And if you're bragging, you're not being humble. And so that was what was always in my mind. I didn't want to brag. And you have to talk about what you're doing or people won't know. And it took me a long time to get comfortable with that. I started off a big part of my entrepreneurial journey really sparked when I started my spa. And I took a school bus and turned it into a spa. And I would go to different conferences. And one of them I went to with my friend, and she was like introducing me to like these people that she just sparked up conversation with, and I like had zero people that I talked to, and I was just so shy, I was just so timid, I didn't want to be like, yeah, I have a boss, I have all this. And I just felt like I was bragging, and that really limited my ability to get that business out there, and I learned so
Yeah.
much about that. And so now I'm so much better at being like, yeah, I have a podcast, and we moms, we just share our stories to help empower each other. And it's just I see what you mean by it's just like this muscle that you have to practice, because yes, I'm pretty outgoing, but in those spaces it was just in my brain that I'm bragging. I'm not sharing, I'm bragging. And so it's just this negative connotation that I had behind it. So I love that you shared that, because it does take a lot of practice, and it does take a lot of going to your challenges. You were challenging yourself to be like, I'm gonna walk out of here with 3 business cards. I love that. I love that you were doing that to yourself, because I wish I wish I would have been so much more assertive. But and then in terms of interviewing people, yeah, sometimes it is really hard. I have always talked to people, but like asking questions, really digging, and I always felt like maybe that was prying, that was being nosy, just all these negative connotations that I had with things that you just have to change the view on it. Like, you're just being curious about someone. People love to talk about themselves. People love
Right.
to share, and they want to share, but they're probably like me. Like, I was looking for people to come up to me and talk to me and ask me questions, but sometimes that's not how the door gets open. You have to step out and you have to ask and you have to be the one to approach people, especially to make things happen. So I love that you shared that because that is huge.
Yeah. That first, I mean, there's so many things there. So first of all, you of all people know there is an art to interviewing, and this is something that we all kind of learn as we get into this space. So definitely have to learn that. The
Yeah.
networking thing, I like to teach a lot about networking in some of my workshops and stuff, and there is an art to networking, and everyone has to figure out their own process and strategy to do that, and
Yeah.
that comes with a lot of practice and figuring that out and not being scared to kind of lean into what serves you, you know? And
Mhm.
then damn, you said another piece that really got to me and I forgot. I hate when that happens. You said something else that was really, really good and I freaking forgot it. If it comes back to me. But yes, all completely understand everything you're saying.
Yeah, and then going to you talking about storytelling,
Yeah.
and because, when I was doing research or just trying to get better at the craft of podcasting, and you just hear different people say certain things, and even wondering, like, am I behind the game? Am I stepping into an already full pool? And it's like people have been telling stories for since dawn of time,
Yeah.
and books are being published by the thousands annually, and
Yep.
we're still picking up books. We're still filling our libraries. So it's like, of course, storytelling is just so powerful. So
Mhm.
like, what can you share, and how did you discover the power of storytelling in building a brand, and how
Mhm.
has that shaped your path?
Yeah, such a good question. I also remember my other thought. Literally
Okay.
right before I jumped on here, I like to batch content. And so I literally just
Mm.
created a video on the misconception on the art of bragging. So I think it's so funny that you brought that up because I'm like, this is what my video is about. So clearly I'm on the right track because people still
Yes,
have this
yes.
misconception. But yes, storytelling. So I've always been a storyteller. When I started reading at 3. I was very
Okay.
much a reader. I'm a poet. I love poetry. I started writing through poetry. And then in college I took a lot of like screenwriting classes. Like in my mind I thought I was going to be a journalist or writer or something. That didn't happen in that way, but writing has always been a passion. I even started a really popular blog when I was in college and I just shared a lot and people resonated. So things like that have always been like bits and pieces or pockets of how I've told my story. When I got into marketing and branding, it's all about storytelling, right? It's like, how do you
Mhm.
help your audience? How do you convey this to your audience? What matters to them and things like that. When I started applying it to helping people understand that we are all our own brands, like we are all the CEOs of
Mhm.
our own brand, it was like another click for me. It was like, okay, this is how people can help articulate themselves. I've been
Yeah.
able to do it so well. This is how I do it. I can help other people do it. So storytelling has always been at the center kind of what I do. Like to this day, I
Mm.
still love blogging. I'm still that girl. I'm gonna write a book. I'm working on a memoir in my mind. Like there's so many different things that I love that has storytelling and writing. The other
Yeah.
piece to that too is you mentioned books. I like when I say I'm an avid reader, I'm an avid reader. Like I literally in my teenage little heart in my little room, I had over 500 books. And my mom was like,
Wow.
she every week my mom was like, I need you to donate some of these books. And I was like, absolutely not. Like we're not doing that. Like I was the girl that sat in the library on the floor and read books after school. So like reading is really important to me. And because of that, I would reach out to authors. Like I was that girl. And so I remember I'll
Mm.
never forget reaching out to an author way back in the day. And I had asked, I was like, I really want to write a book, but I feel like it's so saturated. Everyone's writing about this and that. It kind of feels the same. And I will never forget what she told me. She was just like, you are not everybody else. No one's going to write from your experience. And
Mhm.
I really took that to heart. Fast
I just
forward
got the
years
chills.
later, it was like an mind you, I wrote her a letter, like not an email, like a letter. It was just the most chilling thing for me. Fast forward a couple of years later, I mentioned before, I do have anxiety, I struggle a
Mm,
lot with that when it comes to public speaking. It was such a
yeah.
nerve-wracking thing for me before I got better at it. And I will never forget that I read a quote one day that I carried through my days. It said, "You cannot be an imposter in your own experience." And that is something I say before
Mm,
I hit any stage, because it's like one of those things of like, why would people care about your story? It's like, why wouldn't they? Right? Because you are the only one that's going to tell your story in the way you're going to tell it. And so that has
yeah.
to be some type of comfort. And so to me, that sums up storytelling. You know what I mean? Everyone
Mhm.
has a voice. People need to hear you. If you can, you will, not even if you can, you will connect with at least one person who could resonate with something that you're
Yeah.
saying. So I feel like that's a win. So storytelling for me is like the creme de la creme of what I do.
Yeah, and then there's such an art to it though. There's such an
Yes.
art to, like you said, like that's why marketing, that's why you have to hire people in regard
Mhm.
to marketing because there's such an art to storytelling and I'm trying my best to get better at it. So what are like top 3 tips that you can share in regard to conveying a story in a captivating way?
Yeah. First, I think the most important thing to do is auditing. I always talk about self auditing. A lot of people feel like I know I do X, but I can't seem to connect the dots for other people to understand what I do, especially when you're multi hyphenate. That's a big thing. We do so many
Yeah.
things, we're passionate about so many things, but how do we tell other people that? It's doing an audit on yourself, right? You need to really take a step back, that zoom out lens, and really kind of
Mm,
take a look at what the through line is with who you are. Get to the core
okay.
of your why. I think that's the biggest thing. And even with just in general for brands, what is your why? When you can understand what your why is, then you can figure that's some clarity. Then you can figure out what the
Mhm.
strategy is from there, right? And then once you understand your why and you're deciding, okay, how do I even go about sharing this? You have to start thinking about your audience. How are you delivering on this? What does that mean, right? And then when you
Mhm.
get there, you're figuring out, okay, what are the right channels I'm going to pull, right? What does that mean for me? So, for example, let's say you're someone who is, I could even use me. I know that I don't need to be across all social media platforms. That's no one does, right? But a lot of people feel that they do. But I know
Mhm.
personally for me, my channels are LinkedIn, like that's my spot. Substack, love Substack.
Okay.
That's a good place to be. And maybe like a Threads, right? Like I don't need to be everywhere. Once I figured those out, how am I communicating on those platforms? Thinking about my audience, how I'm going to tell the story that I want to tell for them, right? And again, it's making sure that the story that you have, which you've already figured out because you know your why, you're not going to tell the same thing in the same way everywhere to everyone. But at the core of that is your authenticity. At the core of that, you know your values, you know your why,
Mhm.
you know what you're trying to say. And so I think the biggest advice I always give to people is understanding your why. Because if you don't know your why, nobody else will, and then figuring out how do you deliver that into what audience, because that's going to be the most important thing. It's also really good something to think about for like interviews. The world is in a really interesting place right now. Everybody's looking for a job. When you think about your why, you have to think about when you walk into an interview, the hiring manager is not going to understand that you bring XY value to anything, right? You
Yeah.
have to help them connect the dots on why your value is important here. So that's your storytelling, right? How do you tell that story? So it's really getting to clear that clarity on the why, and then figuring out how do you deliver on that is going to be the most important thing.
Okay, so from that, I have a few questions
Yes.
because of course, we hear that a lot. Find your why, figure out your why. But what advice can you give on how to make a specific why instead of just, I just want to help people. I just want to, inspire people. If I can inspire one person, that would be good enough for me. Like that's their why. So, how do you make a very specific why to target a very specific audience?
Yeah, that and I would argue that I don't know if that's a why. I think that's like I don't know, it's a hope, it's an intent for sure. But I think when I think my perspective, when I think about a why, I think about almost like your purpose, but that can also vary. But I think about what is going to be the through line of the work you do and how you show up. Like what is going to be the through line of your value. So,
Okay.
I think it's so the auditing piece is huge, but I think when I think about that, I want people to understand that they really need to take a look at everything that they do. So, what fuels you? You know, what gives you the passion? What are things you hate? What are things you like? Really take an audit of all of that, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
from there, if you lay all that out, you'll start
Mm-hmm.
to understand that the things will start to connect, and they'll be small, and maybe you won't be able to decipher that, which is why people hire me. But like, there'll be things that will connect the dots. You know, at the crutch of all of it, it'll be like, I really love helping people in this way, or I really love providing access to these people for this reason, or like there's a connective tissue somehow. And it could be crazy things. It could be like you were an accountant but now you're an author and you don't even understand how you got there, but it's like, oh, but at the core of all of that, you were a problem solver, right? And you once to problem solve in accounting, but now you want to problem solve in literacy. Like, there's just connective tissues that people need to figure out. It takes work. It's not
I
easy, I will
see.
say.
I see.
It takes work, but I think to me that's the why. So when you start figuring out that, that's going to be like, oh, this is how I show up in everything I'm doing. Like, I know for me, in every space I walk into, I'm always looking, one, how to create something, and two, how to help people tap into something. It just shows up in different ways. I did it in fashion, I've done it in tech. That is kind of my connective why. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm not putting constraints on what it looks like. I just know at the core this is what fuels me, and somehow I'm able to make it work in different environments. Did that track for you? Because I know
Yeah.
it can be hard.
No, I love when you said you can go from accounting to, writing a book, but the
Yeah.
core of it is problem solving. And if you don't mind me
Yeah.
asking, can you give an example? Like, what is your why?
Yeah. So it's funny because I spent a lot of time, especially in undergrad, looking for my purpose, and I got nowhere. I was like, I don't understand. Why won't purpose find me?
Why am I
And
here? Why was I
I
born?
was so, oh my God, I struggled. I struggled. And I was just like, it was crazy. And I was like, oh my God, never, don't ever do that. But it kind of found me in an interesting way because I started realizing that once I started embracing my own identity, when I started embracing who I was and how I showed up, I realized that, at the core of that, I love to create things. I love to create things.
Mhm.
And I can create things in the fashion world. I could be a blank canvas. I could create marketing campaigns. I love to create. In the middle of that creation, I also love kind of like that vision building piece. I love being able to tap into something that's not there and be innovative with it. I love to help take people out of the boxes. And all of that were different layers of my life. Once
Mm.
I figured that out, it just kind of came together. It just, my superpower is helping people tap into their potential. I can be in a room with anyone and they can tell me something. I'm like, oh, you know what you should do? And I can come up with like a list of things that you should probably do. Whether you listen to me or not, that's on you, but a list of things. And like, I'll have people tell me, they're like, how do you do that? And I'm like, I don't know. I listen to people and it just happens. And I was like, but I also did that for myself. And so I think
Mhm.
that kind of resonates for me. So I always say my superpower is helping people tap into their potential. And my why in life is really helping people own their narrative, is really helping people or brands just own the space that they're in, thrive in that space. And it's because I've done it in my world. So, yeah.
And then back to storytelling, how can someone use that to reinvent themselves?
That's the core of everything. Like, if you understand your value, then you can understand how to deliver on it. And when you think about storytelling, like, people get caught up in like the language and there's so many things there, sure. You could always, if you need to do a website, you can hire a copywriter. Like, there's so many things you can do, but it's getting clear on how you tell your why. Once you get clear on
Mm.
that, and I like to, in my work, I call it like a brand statement. That can
Okay.
eventually turn into some type of bio, whatever. So think about like your elevator pitch or your unique value proposition. All of
Mhm.
that is like the core. I would say your core. So once you figure out what that is, you can flesh out anything. You can turn it into a bio, you can turn it into whatever you want it to be. But and language is a thing, right? There's so many resources, copywriters, ChatGPT. You can figure out the language, but you need the clarity first. It doesn't really matter if you don't have the clarity. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people who are writing a lot of fluff. There's a lot of people who are inauthentic with how they're showing up and telling their story because they're actually not clear about a lot of things. Like, you can go through something and be like, I don't really think that's what that person is trying to say, but they don't actually know because there's such a disconnect with
Yeah.
what they're doing and how they want to show up. And so this is why I'll always go back to your why. I'll always go back to your why, and then I'll always go back to really understanding how you embrace your own narrative, and then you can be
Hmm.
able to deliver on it.
Okay. And it's funny because like all the things that you're saying, it just like going into you can't be an imposter in your own story. And it's just
Hmm.
so easy to feel like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And like for me, and I don't know who else feels this way or if you feel this way, but for me it's like after like a few years have gone by, those experiences feel like a lifetime ago. Like
Hmm.
managing in retail feels like forever ago. Even owning my bus, even though I, sold it 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago now, it feels like I did that a lifetime ago. But
Hmm.
when I'm doing other things, of course, those lessons and the things that I learned building the bus or selling and things like that, they're still there. They're still within
Yeah.
me, and sometimes I forget about that. And when you also said, it's hard to connect the dots sometimes, like, of course, when I was younger and I was just starting out managing, I've always been a sponge. Like, I've always listened to people and really taken advice because I've never been the type of person to feel like I know everything.
Hmm.
And I was really good at I'm really good with sales. I can sell anything. That's just like my skill. But when I became a manager because I sold so well. I made the
Hmm.
company so much money. Just I felt like I was just being me. I was just talking and then they would buy. It was just like, "Oh, cool, you want it? Awesome," and like, "Okay." And then when my boss was like, "Okay," before I had the interview to become a manager, she was like, "You have to speak to it." And I was like, "What does that even mean? I don't know. I'm just being me." And I bombed that interview.
Oh.
But I got it because I made the company so much money,
Right.
and
Like
it
they saw
was
your value.
yeah, they saw the value, I just didn't know how to speak to it.
Hmm.
So, like you said, kinda auditing yourself, what do those steps look like? Because even now, sometimes I think about, like, how did I sell? And sometimes I feel like I still can't figure out what is it that cause those people to buy things from me, and still, even with my bus, like, sometimes I just felt so like, when people would leave and I would make a huge sale, I'd be like, "Oh my goodness, like, I just did that. How?" How do I speak to this? And I see people making digital products online, how to sell, how to market, how to do certain things, and I'm like, I don't really know how sometimes I do what I do. So what are, like, some top tips that where or like a journaling practice that you can share that will help you to kinda get down to the root of how you do the things that you do?
Hmm. So there's a lot of things you could everything you're saying kind of goes back to your core values. And there are a lot of
Mhm.
things you could do. There's all these tests that you can take to understand how you show up, all these things, what's your strengths, all that stuff. That would be one thing because I think
Mhm.
that, for anyone who has done consulting or coaching with someone, like I have a coach, you kind of like you want to learn those things because it helps you understand you better. So I would say
Yeah.
that's like a first thing. I think for something more quicker and just to really understand it, I'm always going to go back to the auditing piece. But also, let me ask you, when you were selling, why did you do it? Like when you saw someone and you decided to just talk to them, you weren't even trying to sell. Why did you do it?
See, that's like a hard question because
Is it
I
though?
don't want to say like, oh, I did it for the money, like it was just my job. It was, of course, I liked what I was selling and I would just listen to the person. I would just listen to like what brought you in. I'm looking for some jeans or whatever. I'm looking for an outfit for XYZ. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, cool." Like, I would assess what they had on and then offer what I perceived that they would like. And I did it because I totally connect with you with the fashion piece because I thought that that was something that I wanted to do in regard to styling and that type of thing. And so I did it because I love fashion. I love putting outfits together, and it just felt like I was helping them shop.
And then for your entrepreneurial business with the bus?
I did it because I always grew up with really bad acne, and I know what that shame, not shame, but embarrassment and negative self-talk did. And when I healed my acne and I healed my skin, I also knew how that helped me better in life and show up better in life, and I wanted to do that for other people.
Okay. So right there, those are your whys right there. So what I'm hearing is that you are a problem solver and you love helping people get to the best version of themselves. And you happen to have done it in these ways. One was through fashion and one is through skincare, right? And so I think that at the core, that's what you do. And the reason why you're so good at it is because you connect. You like connecting with people. You're not just trying
Mhm.
to solve the problem. You're trying to understand the person, the root of who the person is in that short amount of time and solve their problem. Like it's not a one size fits all. It's you're trying to solve their problem, their specific problem because you connect with them. You want people to be their best version and whatever that looks like. And you like to
Mhm.
problem solve. That's your why.
Well, that's funny because then that connects right to mothering holistically because I was feeling lonely and I
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed talking to other moms.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, okay, well, I want other moms to feel like they had an example.
This all makes sense to me. And I think that what I heard was you overthinking it a lot. It can be very simple. This is who
Hmm.
you are.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, because that's so funny that you said you broke it down super simplistically, and you don't have to. I do overthink if you
Yeah.
can't tell, but wow, that's so funny to see the core theme in each of those situations now
Yeah.
then
This
of
is some
wow.
real time work, okay? Real time work. I'm telling you. But just, you know what it is though? I will say, like, so there's so many people like you who are like, what are the tips? Like, how can I do this? And yes, there's strategies for sure, but there's also just having the space. What I find often for my clients is that they actually haven't given themselves the space. If you take the time to give
Mm.
yourself that space, don't overthink it, work through a couple of little strategies, you'll actually get to the core of what this looks like. And then again, if you can't, that's why you have people like me
Yeah.
can help you.
Yeah, because, it's yeah, it is so easy to
Mhm.
overthink
Yeah.
yourself. I
Yeah.
mean, we're always our worst critics, so it's just so easy
Mhm.
to and then going back to feeling like you're bragging. So I do think that that's hilarious that you just did some content behind that because it's so easy to feel like you're bragging about who you are instead of looking at it as you're just sharing what you do and you could potentially help someone or connect with someone and connect dots and open doors of or open a door for them. And so
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up. And of course I want to tie this all back into being a mom. So you're
Yeah.
doing all this stuff and you're helping other people. How are you navigating this now as a mom and balancing all these different hats that you wear?
Oh my God. So I have a 20-month-old and she's like 20 months going on 20 years. Because this toddler world is not for the faint of heart. It's rough.
I'm
And
right here with
so
you.
it's a lot. But so I'm gonna say something that may be an unpopular opinion, and I'm okay with
Okay.
that. I hate the word balance. I hate the word balance. And specifically because for a large chunk of my life, I strived for it. I was like, oh, how do I find a balance? And there is no balance. Okay. Again, this is my perspective, but there is no balance. I strive for harmony because I think that at the end
Okay.
of the day, we are always going to have all these priorities. They're not going to change. They're actually, especially for ambitious women like us, they're going to increase actually. So we're always going to have priorities,
Mhm.
mom, sister, entrepreneur, all the things. And I don't think that at any time we'll be able to give 100% to all of it. We won't, right? Something
Mhm.
will always fall to the wayside in any given day. It's just it's the reality of the situation.
Yeah.
However, if you find harmony among your roles and the things that you're doing, there is a level of one, giving yourself the grace for it being okay for that to happen. And two, priorities, prioritizing in any given day, the role, the project, the task. That's what it
Yeah.
comes down to. Like, for example, yesterday, my wife was working and she had to go into the office. I had our daughter all day because she doesn't go to daycare on Friday. She only goes Monday through Thursday. That is a full-time job day. So that means that getting back to a client, prepping for an interview, whatever that looks like, is not going to happen probably for the day, right? And so 90% of my time is going to be spent with her and being a good mom. And that's what I'm doing, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. That's what it is. You know, I already know that. So when she goes to sleep, maybe I'm able to tackle two other things, you know, and that has to be okay. It doesn't mean that
Mm-hmm.
anything I love anything any less. It doesn't mean that anything is not going to get all of me at some point, but it all
Mm-hmm.
can't happen in the same day. And so there will never be the balance. But as long as I love what I'm doing, as long as I'm prioritizing the things that matter to me, I'm gonna find the harmony in that and I'm gonna be okay with that. So that's kind of how I live my life. And again, I was there. I thought I needed to balance the whole world. It's not possible.
Well, see, I feel like harmony and I guess harmony and I mean, I feel like harmony and balance kind of go hand in hand though, because the
They
way
kind
I
of
looked at
do.
balance was it's not about trying to carry it all at one
Mm,
time in both hands equally. It's just about how do you not let things fall completely.
right,
So, and it's, you're not just gonna quit your job. You're not just gonna let the house be a catastrophe. You're not just gonna not eat.
right.
You're not just gonna not bathe. You're gonna do all those things. But how do you make sure that it doesn't fall and you keep that balance? But I do like that word harmony, especially as a singer. I
You
do
know,
like
I
that
think
word.
when you think about the balance beam, right? And this is how
Mhm.
I started deciphering it. When you think about the balance beam, in order for it to be balanced, it actually has to be 50-50, right? Like if there's any tip,
I
it's
see.
not, I'm like, if there's any tip, it's going to be like this. And that's not possible, right?
Yeah.
Like you're saying, you can do all those things will happen at some point, but it's never gonna be it's never gonna be
Even.
equal. And
Yeah.
so that's why I think about harmony because I know that there's no way in possibly hell I can do all these 80 things I need to do and then still take care of myself.
Right.
In one
Right.
day. It's just not gonna
Right.
happen. So that's how I think about it. But I think you raise a good question. And this is, you know, I love throwing things out there to for people to decipher what balance actually means to them. Is it that
Mhm.
equilibrium or does it mean
Mhm.
something else? I don't know.
Mhm. Yeah, and of course, that's why this show isn't motherhood balance. It's
Yeah.
mothering holistically because
Yes, which I
holistic is
love. I
just
love that.
thank you. Yeah, because it's just, trying to figure out what's best for you.
Yes.
Holistic is caring for the whole person,
Yeah.
and we are all different. And I know that holistic is one of those words that's thrown out there and it sounds nice. But using it in the way that it sounds is the reason why the show is named this because your care, the way you have to go about life is going to be completely different than the way I have to go about life, but we can still both be happy in our own personal lives.
Yeah.
And so that's what I loved about that. And I also love when you brought up, how are you going to be doing different things? Because one thing I don't do is going to be on my computer and do like electronic things while my daughters are awake because I stay home, so I completely know what you mean, like, not having them go to daycare and stuff, but now, like, they're a little bit older, it's really nice because they're now watching me take on projects and just being with me, being around, playing by themselves, and then, we kind of go into playing together, and then they let me keep going
Hmm.
with my project, so that's been really nice to have a good harmony with
Yes.
my daughters because it is nice watching to see how they become a little bit more independent and allows
Mm.
me to stretch a little bit more because like I just put up wallpaper in the studio. I'm working on the in-person part and it was so cute to be putting it up. And then I had like scraps, so they would go up to the wall and try to like
So cute.
put it on. And I'm like, maybe you'll help mommy with DIY projects
I love
one day.
that.
But I definitely will use that harmony a little bit more than balance because I like that. I like how you worded that.
Yeah, I'm happy it resonates, you know.
Yeah, it does. It does definitely. And then of course with the definition of if it is balanced, it's 50-50, and we really are pulled in so many different directions at
So many.
one given point, and it's not balanced. So I
Mhm.
like that you said that. And of course, like again, we're talking to our moms. So is there like a piece of advice that you would offer to a mom wanting to build her personal brand, but while also raising her family?
Ugh, so hard. I think I've been like thinking a lot about this for myself because I realized that, you know, especially as new moms, I think that you there's so much you don't know. There's so much you don't
Mhm.
know, and there's so much you don't realize. I think it's also very different for moms who are ambitious. Like just speaking for myself, like before we had our daughter, I was doing a lot of things. You know, I was like out here, I was thriving, you know, and it things change. They change no matter what, right? When you have a kid. And
Yeah.
so I think it's really hard to always find your harmony on how you manage all of these things. But I think the best advice I could give just from my own experience would be definitely don't lose yourself because I think
Mhm.
it's so easy to do. It's so easy to do.
Mhm.
Like your kid becomes your world, you know? It's just what it is. And it's like it's so beautiful and it's great, but at the end of the day, it's really important for you to know who you are, know what you want, and have things outside of that. You know,
Yeah.
anything outside of that, whether it's your hobbies, whether it's your career, whatever it is, like
Mhm.
because at the end of the day, you will have to come back to that. You know what I mean? Like that is what's gonna give you that autonomy. That's what's gonna fuel you.
Yeah.
That's what's gonna create opportunities. You know, like you have to
Mhm.
come back to that. And so I always, you know, my friends are always like, you know, I thought that like things would be like I knew things would be different when you had a kid, but they're like, I thought things would be a little bit more different. But like you kind of feel the same, but not. Like they're like, you still kind of like you still out here. I was like, yeah, because I'm not gonna lose myself. Like I'm still ambitious. I'm still going for what I want, even more so, actually. It's
Mhm.
harder. I'm still doing it, you know? So I think that would be the best advice I can give because I've just seen too many examples of people in my spaces and family who just kind of lose themselves. And it's just one of those things where it's like I always believe God or the universe or whoever you believe in didn't give you the potential to be who you are and be put on this planet to serve in the way you should be serving for you
Mhm.
to diminish that or to pause on that or be stagnant on that. Your gifts are important and how you feel is important and how you thrive is important. And I want people to remember that. So I think that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. And I was actually just interviewed on another podcast, and it's just brought back to my memory because being in social media, I was seeing women talking about the Proverbs 31 woman. And I finally looked it up for myself. And in that, it doesn't just say a woman is supposed to have children and devote everything to her children. It says that the woman takes care of the home and she has her own things where she goes out and she sells and makes money and provides for the home as well. And after reading that, that was honestly a big push for me to feel okay with
Hmm.
being ambitious and wanting more outside of just being a mom, air quotes, because of course it's amazing, you know, and it is a huge job and it's a huge responsibility.
Right.
But your children are going to leave one day, and then you're going to be left with what? And so when I read that scripture, I read that proverb, I was like, okay. Now that makes sense. It makes sense that we are able to do more, and why we a lot of women who I see innately want more,
Yeah.
and we get sad and depressed, lonely, that type of thing when it feels all we have is our children. And so yeah, I love that that is the advice that you're giving.
Yeah, and also, like, think also about the children, right? Like, my goal is always for my daughter to see that, you know, mommy's a badass. Like, she's out here and she could do the same thing. You know, I want that.
Mhm.
I don't ever want it to be like, oh, my mom had to like do this, and she was just so siloed in this, and I don't know how to like strive for what I want. It's like, no, I want you to take over the world.
Yeah,
I literally want you to be better than me. Like I literally
exactly.
want that. And so it's like you have to be the example. Like I truly believe that,
Mhm,
you do. So that's
mhm.
also ambition for me as well.
Yes, and like you said, just being an example for our kids is huge, and of
Yeah.
course that fuels me too, and I want the same thing, especially coming from, doing all the things that I've done. It's like, even going back to you saying don't lose yourself,
Yeah.
because it's like, man, before I was able to just dive into my projects, take it on head first, spend as much time as I wanted to on it, and now I'm trying to weave, like, do something, pause, and it's
Yeah.
so hard for my mental sometimes,
Yes.
but we just, do what we have to do, and just thinking about that sometimes is a struggle, but it's better to work through it than to avoid it completely, and then, like you said, our children are just like, "Well, I guess when I become a mom," and I feel like that's another reason why we are seeing in a lot of the generations where they don't wanna have kids because they don't wanna give up their career, or they don't wanna give up who they are, their life, their
Yeah.
fun, and it's like you can do it, it's just you go about it differently than you did before. Yeah.
100%. 100%. Yes. Spot on.
And, so we're just gonna be weaving in and out. So, like, what do you feel the biggest misconceptions are about being visible online? Because, of course, as a mom, we you hear all these different things about, the digital footprint and things like that. So what do you feel are the biggest misconceptions?
I think for me, especially like just for clients that I deal with, because I deal with a lot of like C-suite executives and like
Mm.
founders and multi hyphenates and such. People have this fear of sharing too much. That's a huge thing. Like people are like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like I don't want to be vulnerable. I don't know how to do this, all this stuff. And it's just like, I hear you, but no one ever said you had to share your life. No one ever said that. You know what I mean? I think that and it goes back to your whole why, right? Like, I think that people, especially, I guess, like founders like us or people who want to be thought leaders in whatever channel, things like that, you have to go back to your why because you need to understand what's your purpose of sharing anything. What do you want to share
Mhm.
exactly? And then how do you want to do that, right? It doesn't always have to be I need to completely 100% expose all of my things. No one's asking you to do that. You shouldn't do that. But what you should share is you should share a little bit of authenticity. People want to see something that they can relate to. Like I hate when first of all, people can tell fraudulent people. Period. Like when people are being like, they're like, Also, I'm the person because I'm in the space a lot. If someone's one way on one platform and then there's someone on another platform, I'm like, who are you? Because I don't see the consistency, and consistency is huge for me. So I
Mhm.
think that people need to really understand that you get to control your narrative, right? You get to expose as much as or as little as you would like on wherever you're whatever you're posting, whatever you're doing.
Mhm.
And I think that people need to work more at doing that and stop looking at it as some type of like they feel like they're chained and they can't do all of it so they do none of it. Like no, we need to get to a place where you find your comfort level and you
Mhm.
know your story enough, you know what your why is or your expertise and what you want to share in a way that actually serves you. And so I think that that's the biggest misconception I see people like, I don't want to post on social media because I don't want to be vulnerable or I don't want to share too much of my life. And it's just like, no one asked you to do that.
Yeah, it's funny though that you say that because I feel like I was just going through that in my head, and I was like, of course you're looking at other people that are in your space, and you're trying to understand the market and that
Right.
type of thing. And I do see a lot of, like, first off, I see a lot of moms that share their children.
Okay.
And I'm a little bit more like, I would share my children a little bit, but my husband is like, nah, you know. And so of course I'm respecting that, and I want to make sure that I'm respecting that. So
Yeah.
it's like, man, I really don't want to put my children out there to be vulnerable to predators, and I want them to be able to what's the word? Consent when they're
Yeah.
online, because they're not at
Mhm.
that age of consent yet. And I'm like, they have so many followers. Is that why? How do I go about being authentic when my life is filled with my kids, but I don't share my kids? I'm a stay-at-home mom, but then you never see them, and I'm trying to navigate that. And so it is so easy to overthink it, and then it's either all or nothing. Like, I just won't share. I'll just share the clip from the podcast.
No.
But I'm like, okay, I'm sitting down, I'm listening to you, of course, right now, and I'm like, okay, there are ways that you can get zoned in on your why and then branch out from there. But it is really nice. Like, I'm thinking about like a spider web gram, it's like, okay, here's your why. And then how do you kind of branch out from there? And I'm loving this conversation because it is definitely helping a lot. And for those that are overthinkers like me, this is really, really helping.
Yeah, no, oh my, well, first of all, I relate to you. I feel very strongly about. I definitely have an opinion about people posting kids. Like, I think everyone should do whatever they want to do, and I love seeing all these cute kids on their Instagram accounts,
I
all the
know.
stuff. I wouldn't do that. Like, I literally started posting our daughter probably after she turned a year, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't even post her in my feed. First of all, I only post her on Instagram and Facebook, and only in stories because 24
Mm-hmm.
hours, whatever. Like, and
Yeah.
it's not often either. It's
Mm-hmm.
quick moments, whatever. But that's what I do. But I think that when you think about your life and how to make sure that you're being inclusive of it and not separating things, I think you can definitely post things where it's like. I'm making this up. Let's say you want to talk about their outfits for the day. You post a picture of the outfits. That's a still shot, right? You don't got to post them. It's the outfits. You show something about, like, I don't know, them eating dinner, but you're not showing them, you're showing the actual dinner. Like, there's so many ways around how you
Yeah.
can still be inclusive and post without posting them. And then also there's also like little things like hands or shoes, or there's so many ways you can get creative. I think it's just challenging yourself to get creative with
Yeah.
how you do it. But there's so many people who do such a good job of doing that too. So you can do it.
Okay, and I'm gonna ask, just because I want to know personally. I always hear, and even you just said it, with batch um, creating.
Content. Hmm.
What does that, if you don't mind sharing just a little bit, because I don't want to, like, get on into what you offer, but it's like, what is what is the process behind thinking about how you want to go about organizing your content? I feel like I've asked all the questions to Google, and I'm just like, why can't I make this click in my mind, you know?
Yeah, I mean, so it goes back to, and I'm sorry, everything will go back to your why and your purpose and why you're posting. But let's say, okay, I guess using you as an example, if you decide that you want to start sharing, like you think about your content pillars, let's say, and you decide that you want to
Mhm.
share a little bit of lifestyle, you want to share the podcast, you want to share some of you, maybe expertise or something like that. Like, you got to figure out your buckets. Like, what are those? You figure those out,
Mhm.
and then you start thinking about the actual content. What do you want to say, right? So if you're like,
Mhm.
okay, well, I want to do a day in the life series, making this up, then you would figure out, okay, maybe if I want to do this, let me think about the week that I'm going to do all this stuff. And then you take like your Sunday and then you decide to do all the content. And that could be either you writing the post if you're not going to do videos or anything, you're finding the photos. I like to always tell people to have a bank of photos so you can always pull from, or you're doing your videos, which is what I was
Mm.
doing. So whenever I'm like about to be on camera for something, because as moms, I have a uniform. So I'm in sweats, I'm in Uggs, I look crazy. So whenever I'm like doing something or going somewhere, I try to use that as a filming opportunity so that I
Mm.
don't have to do this again. And
Right.
so I'll start thinking, okay, I want to do like 3 videos this week. So I'm going to set that up and do this before I do that or whatever. So that's how I think about it.
Okay.
But again, it goes back to what your content is. I do my content a month out. And
Mm.
so what I do is I create a whole content calendar for like I did January, and then I give space for random posts. I give space for, because I have ideas all day. So I give space. I'm like, I want to switch this. So I give space for that. And I give space for, I'm like, okay, I want to have like 5 videos a month. Like, let me figure out which content is going to turn into that. And then there's also things like I was
Mm.
on this podcast or I want to promote that, like different things like that. So I kind of fit that all into my content calendar,
Okay.
and that's batching, and then every week I'll decide if I want to schedule it ahead. Sometimes I do a day of, but everything is ready to go. So that's kind of how I do it because,
Hmm.
with our schedules, I'm working at night. And so I gotta, make this work.
Yeah, I know that I need to give myself a little bit more grace because I am I had a little bit of help to kind of navigate how to really put together the shows and keep things on topic and things like that. But as I'm pivoting right now, I'm back to it just being me. And
Hmm.
I edit my, videos
Hmm.
and put together all my clips and stuff. And sometimes I'm just like, how do I add more to that? But hearing you say that you batch out your content in a month, I'm like, okay, Kaylee, you need to get a little bit more creative. So I appreciate you sharing that because I need to look at it differently.
Yeah, and also like and I agree, give yourself the grace. Also, like you don't have to post every day, right? So like you could decide
Mhm,
I'm only posting 3 times a week. You already know that some of your content is set because you're gonna have your edits from the videos, right? So that's already
mhm.
content. And then you're figuring out, okay, what are those other two, three pillars that I want to drop in? So let me figure that out. Like, and again, you can leverage AI as well. And so make that, like you can do it. I have
Yeah.
faith.
I know, and I appreciate you sharing and kind of giving me some tips because and of course, I'm sure other people are jotting down the tips like
I
I
hope
am
so.
because it's yeah, because it's just it does seem like a beast, and it seems like something insurmountable sometimes, and
Mhm.
I feel like when you like, if you go to hike and you look at the top and you're just like, "How am I gonna get up there?"
I
But
mean,
then you just
so
start walking it, and
true.
next thing you know, you're at the top, so
Yeah.
I'm trying to look at it like that, and you're helping me look at it like that, just take it one step at a time, think, do, post, so
Yeah, and
mhm,
consistency. I will
mhm,
always go back to consistency. Like the thing I always tell my clients because they're always like, I hate social media. I'm like, I get it. I hate it too. But you need it. If you're gonna promote yourself, you're gonna be you need it. And so do what serves you, right? You don't have to post every day. You could post once a week. Just post once a week. You know what I mean? I hate
mm,
when people go, oh my God, like I post once here and then 3 weeks later I'm posting. No. If you're committing to posting once a week, post once a week. If you're gonna do 3 times a week, do 3 times a week. Stick to your consistency. As long as you stick to your
okay,
consistency, get your strategy or your plan together, it becomes a lot, it's a muscle. It becomes a lot more easier to do. And then give yourself the grace that if you happen to like forget or happen to not be able to pull it together one month, that's okay. But as long as you're have a rhythm of what's happening, you should be
mhm.
okay.
Yeah, that makes sense, and I keep coming back to this thought that I had, and then I keep listening, and it disappears, and I'm like, "Oh, that's what I was gonna say." But anywho, I'm sure it'll come back up again because 'cause I'm like, there was something I keep wanting to I'm like, "Pause, pause."
I hate when
What
that
was it?
happens.
I know, and it keeps coming back up, and I'm like, "Let me try to fish it real quick." There was something that you said in regard to social media, posting. Dang.
Consistency.
It was something, I forget. Dang. Alright, well, it keeps coming back up. Maybe I'll just be like, "Wait," But,
Yeah.
okay, so when you talk about, like, your pillars, what rituals or practices help you stay aligned with your voice, with your mission, your
Yeah.
why?
So, once you do all the work and you figure out like what that looks like for you, it's then figuring out like what do you actually want to talk about? And I think that you have to get honest and clear about what your expertise is, what you're bringing to the
Mhm,
table, whatever that looks like. And so for me, I focus a lot on branding. Obviously, I want to be my goal is to be an expert in this work in this space. And so
mhm,
branding and what does that look like for individuals and clarity work, that's all like one thing. Then I'm random as hell, so I love talking about life stuff. So I'm like all about life lessons, things like that. That's another bucket for me.
Mhm.
I have clients, so I have client testimonials or client stories, which are always relatable and helpful, you know.
Mhm.
And then there's like industry stuff, you know, like what's going on in our world, what's going on in my world as it relates to XYZ. So those are also topics. And then networking or promo stuff. So those are kind of like my buckets. It's probably like six or so of them. And then I kind of
Okay.
like fluctuate them throughout content. There, some are heavier than others, right? Like I don't, it's not
Mhm.
like I'm always posting about like something I'm on or whatever, but I try to like at least be a little consistent where at least once a month they're flowing through something. I'm posting about a
Okay.
networking event, I'm posting about something branding, whatever. So that's kind of how I operate. And yeah, that's kind of how that's so I would share with people once you understand what you actually want to communicate and what that looks like for you, or you want to be an expert in XYZ, you figure out like what are those topics that are important. It has to be important because if not, what are you posting about? You know what I mean? Has
Right.
to be important, has to mean something to you. Once you figure that out, then you just start thinking about the content, you know? And it could be as a lot of people feel like things need to be buttoned up or like it doesn't. Like, I think that we're moving into a world now where people are leaning more on their authenticity as they should. And it's just
Mhm.
like, say what you want to say. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I say random stuff all the time on LinkedIn as well. Like, I'm like, you know, I'm always like, this could be an unpopular opinion, but this is how I feel. Like, you know, just be
Mhm.
as honest as you want to be, but still have a purpose, you know, still be intentional about what you're actually saying. Because if you are, it's going to relate to someone. Someone's
Yeah.
going to understand, someone's going to feel it. And, you know, it is what it is. And you also have to, I think when it comes to content, you also have to be in a space of being intentional because all content will not hit, right? And that's hard. That's really hard because you see your peers and things, and you're like, why do people love their posts and blah blah blah. It's tough, but also you have to remember your why. Why are you doing this? You're doing this because you have something to say and you want to share whatever with XYZ about XYZ.
Mhm.
That has to matter more, you
Yeah.
know, and you gotta kind of operate from that place.
Yeah, it is hard when you look at other people and especially when they start around the same time as you and you're just
Yes.
like, "They're so much
Trust me,
further than
I
me," and that type
know.
of thing, and
Yes.
it's hard,
It's
but
hard.
like you said, when you get back to why you're doing what you're doing, it does
Mhm.
kind of help with the fog, help with the cloud, and help you dust it away and blow it away because it's like, okay, well, I'm not there yet, but I'm gonna keep going and I'm gonna keep pushing. I'm not gonna be a quitter. And maybe this is just my test. Maybe this is my test of seeing how resilient I'm gonna be, how much grit I'm gonna have, how strong am I gonna be, and if this is really what I want, I'm gonna keep fighting through it. You know, there's so many stories, unending stories of success stories. Mr. Beast is a big one. You know, he was posting for 2 years with nothing, and then boom, you know?
Yep.
So and look at him now. And there's
So
just countless stories of
many.
that. Yeah, so many
Mhm.
countless stories, and those really do help motivate me as well. And I do remember my thought. It was just I remember you saying you don't feel like you need to be across all platforms because
Mm.
when I was doing my bus, TikTok was like the biggest platform for me. And that is still my biggest platform in terms of on paper how many followers I have. But switching the content, I mean, the content is so different now with being a mom, and it's like, how do I just walk away from this with so many followers, you know? But at this point, I'm like, I have to. It doesn't really connect with my audience. You know, it was something I was doing that was completely different. So my point around this is, how do you decide what platforms are best for you in regard to connect back to your why?
Yeah, I mean, it also depends on the type of content you're doing. I would actually argue that I think TikTok actually is a good place for you, but you also probably need to do more content is what I would think.
Mm,
You know what I mean? I think that your the purpose of why you're doing this relates to so much to mothers. I mean, there's so many mothers on TikTok. Like you know what I
that's
mean?
true.
Like they would actually benefit from this content. So I would argue that TikTok actually is the platform you should be on. I think you need to figure out what your content looks like on the platform because it can't just be, it can just be clips and things like that. But I also think there's probably a space where it needs to be more of you because you're the expert in this space of you trying to uncover, what is it like to be a mom and live holistically and help kind of bring out all these other things from all your guests and whatever. So I think that they need to see more of you as well. So I think that's what I would say there. And then again, going back to lifestyle and things like that, I think
Yeah.
they need to see you be a mom like this. I think that's what it is. So I think TikTok will actually be great. But to answer your actual question on how does one decipher, um, I think that it definitely goes back to your content and your audience. I think that a lot of people feel like there's a lot of businesses that feel like, oh, we need to be on Instagram. And it's like, okay, why do you need to be on Instagram, right? Like Instagram is very visual, right? And so unless you have products or, you're doing some type of service that's visually appealing, like photography or like whatever, um I would argue, why do you need to be on Instagram, right? Like there's ways to do it, but there's also other platforms that may just be more suited, right? When I think about a lot of like businesses or consultants and things like that, or even like founders, LinkedIn is a great place to be, right? I
Hmm.
think that a lot of people undervalue LinkedIn because they feel like it's so business heavy. But if you are a business, why are you not on LinkedIn? I mean, there's just questions, right? Like, so I just think there's a lot of things that it's just so funny to me. I'm like, there's a lot of ways to think about it. And I don't think that the other thing I'll say too is you could be across 5 platforms, but have different percentages as well, right? So let's say like you decide to be on LinkedIn. You could be at LinkedIn at like, let's say 70%, and you decide you want to split up the other percentage across these other platforms because they're not as forward as you need to be on LinkedIn, or they're not primaries. There could be primaries or
Mm-hmm.
secondaries and things like that. But I think it
Mm-hmm.
depends on your content. It depends on your audience. And so you got to meet them where they're at. And that's why I said for you, I feel like your audience is on TikTok. I would also argue too
Well,
that
that's
your audience,
positive. That's
it
positive
really,
because it
it
is my
really
biggest
is.
platform. I mean, it's my biggest platform. So that's positive that you're saying that. I guess, yeah, I guess I just,
I
and
mean, I
even,
also think your audience is also on LinkedIn. I don't know if you've ventured there, but I think that let's not negate that there's like 80% of women on LinkedIn who are moms. I mean, that's like not even a percentage, but it feels like a lot of moms on LinkedIn who
yeah, I know.
are
And when I first started this, people were like, "So what's your LinkedIn?" And I was like, "Let me edit
you should,
that." No.
yeah, yeah, you should definitely.
Not that like if anyone went to my LinkedIn, it wouldn't reflect in a positive way. It just wasn't up to date. But hearing the way that you are describing the different platforms is one, what speaks to you as the professional and the expert in this space. But two, I never thought about Instagram. I just thought I see people on Instagram who do this, but as soon as you said Instagram is visual, I feel like that's always why I go to Instagram, is because it's like pretty and aesthetic and romanticized and all these different things. And I think about my content and I'm like, it's really not that. It's not it's not that. And then when you talk about TikTok, it's just hearing the way that you explain the different platforms. It's just sometimes you just don't think about it in that way. So I really appreciate you expressing that and then giving me some pointers. um yeah, and then do you feel like TikTok is really the 3 to 5 posts every day in order to keep growing, or
So I'll say this. I am not a social media strategist. Like I will never say
okay,
that I
okay, okay,
am.
okay.
I know how to do social media. I've done it, but I would never consider myself like the creme de la creme expert on social media. But what I will say is that, and I think about this for any platform, I think that you have to do what serves you. And I think that when you, again, going back to like your why and your purpose of doing this, I think that we can't always decide that we're going to post a certain way because we want to get the hits or we want to go viral. I don't think that's not the strategy to go in with. I think you need to figure out like the channel that works because that's where your audience is, and then
Mm,
you have the content to create to get there, and then we're hoping for the best. We're doing all the things we need to do. I think if you are someone who are like, obviously we're very busy, there's a lot going on. If 3 to 5 is a lot, don't do that. You know what I mean? Do
mhm.
two. Do what works for you because it's going to be about the quality of the content. And so as long as you focus on the quality of it and you start building up that way, things will get better. And then also you'll be able to expand more. You'll decide, oh,
Yeah.
actually I can post 3 or 4 times a week or whatever, but I don't think that should be the way to think. And this is my perspective, but I don't think that's the way to think about it. I think the way to think about it is meeting my audience where they are, creating quality content that matters to me, that I know is going to matter to them, and going from there.
Okay. No, I 100% agree with you. And I think sometimes you think when you ask a certain question, you'll probably get a different answer, but it's just something that I say to myself all the time. And I'm just like, okay, Kaylee, duh, like you can only do what you can do.
Yeah.
And it's just like working out, you don't keep pushing that weight and then your form is looking bad and now you're hurting yourself,
Yeah.
stop at your limit and you'll grow in your own time and you connect
Exactly.
back to everything. So
Yep.
that's why I'm like, all right. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, I'm just sharing my perspective. Everyone has their own feels and thoughts. As someone who hates social media as well, and I struggle with my own brand on it, honestly, I totally understand and get all of this, but I still think there are foundational things that matter, and I think
Mhm.
quality over quantity will never not be a thing. You know what I mean?
Right.
I just feel
Right.
like it just won't. I think quality is what we come back to, and I think that the day and age that we're living in right now, where people are leaning into being more authentic and want to share their voice and really be thought leaders in their spaces, I think that
Mhm.
matters more than ever. And so I think that if you have quality work, that has to count for something.
Yeah. Yes. 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 Okay. This is really helping me. This is really
I'm
helping
glad. I'm
shift.
glad.
Yes, shift my mindset on it. And it's making me feel better in regard to like my social media. And it
Uh,
definitely helps. Like I said, that TikTok is my biggest platform. And you're like, no, keep pushing that. Keep pushing that.
yeah. Change your strategy around it, but
Mm,
stay there, at least for
okay.
now. Yeah.
Yeah. And as we kind of come to a close, when you reflect on your journey, of course, like you said, ebbs and flows, what are you most proud of?
Uh, that I'm still here. I feel like life has been so fascinating and interesting, and there's been so many times where I could have counted myself out, or there's just
Mm,
been so many things that probably weren't in my favor always, and somehow I'm still here. I've still been able to thrive, and I love the word thrive because I'm not just trying. I'm actively thriving. I'm actively
mm,
working towards the version of myself every day I want to be. I'm actively working towards being a great mom, being a great wife, being a great business owner, friend, sister, all the things. And
mm,
that makes me so proud. I think that I have been in a space personally of really trying to figure out if I'm becoming. And then I had a moment where I'm like, I became. And I think that
mm.
that's really interesting because I think we're always trying to find the thing. And it's just like, but you are the thing. And so I think I'm sitting there. I think that's what I'm most proud of. I didn't count myself out. I'm sitting in a space where I know I belong. I know I became, and I need
Yeah.
to. This is good. I need to keep operating on this path because I deserve to be here.
Mhm.
So I think
Mhm.
that's what I'm most proud of.
Yeah, and I love that. I feel like so many people say, I'm just trying to survive, but I love that you're holding on to thrive and you're
Yeah.
thriving and you're actively. I've
Yes.
heard so many people tell me, well, what's for me is for me. No, you got to reach up and grab it and you got to work for it. You can't just nonchalant say la vie.
It's so that quote is so funny because it's like, yes, what's for you is for you and it won't miss you, but you're like, you got to do the work. There has to be
Mhm.
some type of alignment that's there, for it to
Mhm.
actually like manifest. So I totally get that.
Yeah, and that's how I think about faith without works is dead.
Yes.
Because you can believe all the things that you want for your life and that are for you, but God can plan what He has for you. But if you stay in your house all the time, you know.
Listen, I always tell people, I'm like having people are like, "Oh, like I have these plans and this is what I want to do." I'm like, plans without action are dreams that are never going to come true. You know what I mean? Like you could dream all you want, but where's
Hmm.
the action?
Yeah.
So I totally get it. It's like, "Oh, I have hopes." Great.
Yeah. Gotta do something to get
Listen, yes.
it. And then lastly, finish the sentence for me.
Okay.
Mothering holistically means.
Mothering holistically means being the best mom I can be at any given day because I feel like every day my percentage of what that looks like may change. I feel like every day
Mhm.
I'm going to change, but I think as long as my intent and I'm trying my best every single day to be the best mom, it's my whole self. I'm going in my whole self, you know, no matter
Mhm.
how that looks, but it's my
Yeah.
whole self. So that's what I think it means to me.
I love that. And I don't ever expand on it because I
It's
love your
what it means
take.
to you. Yeah, I
Yes.
get it.
And then how can listeners connect with you and explore more of your work?
Yes. So you can find me on most platforms at the underscore Aya underscore brand. You can find me on LinkedIn at Ayanna Dutton. You can find me at my website, ayannadutton.com. Everything pretty much is Ayanna Dutton. And if you want to learn more about like non-corporate girls or anything like that, there's always ways to link out. And I'm always open to chatting. So definitely, if anything I've said here resonates with anyone, or if you need some clarity, I love showing
Yeah.
clarity. Feel free to book a call with me. My calendar is always up to date.
Perfect. Perfect. And again, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. It means so much that, you want to share your story here on the show. So thank you again. And of course, if you want to follow me, you can follow me at Kaylee Berlini on Instagram and TikTok. And then you can follow the show at Mothering Holistically on Instagram, YouTube, and Pinterest as well. And then tag us if you learned anything, if you took something away, if you're going to be auditing yourself, really diving deeper into your why. Definitely tag us when you have discovered that because I will be sharing just taking a little bit more time to better understand. I mean, I feel like I it finally clicked here on the show. But of course we're ever changing and life is multifaceted.
Mm.
So I'll always be sharing. And if you like this episode and feel that it resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps us out, of course, for the algorithm to push us in front of more moms to help them and inspire them as well. You can always share this episode with your friends and your loved ones. And of course, subscribe or follow no matter where you're listening from so you can never miss a weekly episode. They air every Saturday at 6 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So until next time, remember to mother holistically and thrive authentically. I'm your host, Kaylee Berlini, and together we're winning. Bye, y'all.
Bye.